What's going on, folks? Ted from Immersion here, and I wanted to take you through what I've been calling the TLDR series, but let's be honest, sometimes I make these almost just as long as the original live streams. But if you missed it, earlier today, the Unearthed Arcana Playtest 8 came out, and it covers the Barbarian, Druid, Monk, some feat adjustments, which are very small, and some spell adjustments. So I wanted to start off by talking about the Barbarian, and that's what we're going to talk about right now. I'll just remind you real quick, to get access to these, what you have to do is go to D&D Beyond. You're going to go to Sources, Unearthed Arcana, then you're going to scroll down here to Playtest 8. All right? So that'll take you here. Now, Barbarian, in my opinion, was something that didn't need adjustments, really. But I'm actually really over the moon with the changes that they made, and I'll talk through it. I've seen a little bit of give and take on this, so you tell me how you feel. Big changes are, right, that's what's covered here in the design update, you now get 1 rage back when you finish a short rest. So that's part of the rage, like, ability. It is now, when you finish a short rest, you get 1 rage back. Reminder, they did remove the ability to just have unlimited rages at high levels. You are still limited to a maximum of 6. You did have an opportunity to, when you roll initiative, get 1 back later on. You now have 1 back whenever you finish a short rest, which makes sense. Barbarian's whole thing is rage, so having the ability to do them more frequently allows you to do the thing your class is good at doing. They also completely changed Brutal Critical. It's gone now. It's now called Brutal Strike, and we'll talk about what that is shortly. And then all of the levels where it would improve, it changed, and they updated Persistent Rage as well. So, everything else is the same, though, for base Barbarian that you would have seen in previous Unearthed Arcanas. So, if we were to go to Brutal Strike, which now, again, here comes online at level 9, it allows you to, when you activate Reckless Attack, which, as you know, now is when you make the first attack on your turn, you can decide to attack recklessly, and it gives you advantage on attack rolls using Strength until the start of your next turn. Brutal Strike says if you use Reckless Attack, you can forgo advantage on the next attack roll you make on your turn. So mind you, Brutal Strike is limited to only your turn. If that attack hits, the target takes an extra D10 damage of the same type dealt by the weapon or unarmed strike, and you can cause 1 Brutal Strike effect of your choice. And well, I guess I'll just talk about them. Forceful Blow. The target is pushed 15 feet straight away from you. You can then move up to half your movement speed straight towards the target without provoking attacks of opportunity. Or Hamstring Blow. The target's speed is reduced by 15 feet until the start of your next turn. Now, some people have said, all right, remember, it was actually brought up in the video that the D&D team did on this, or Jeremy Crawford did in his interview, is that the original interaction between Reckless Attack and Brutal Critical was that the improved chance for critical using Reckless Attack, right? You have advantage on your attack rolls, potentially doubling your chance by rolling with advantage of scoring a critical hit, thus triggering Brutal Critical. However, that is a whole main function of your core class that is triggered on what is a large percent of the time, 5% of the time on a roll of a d20, up to 10%, right, if you roll with advantage. And, as was brought up by Jeremy Crawford in the video, for some people, that's like, I rolled an 8 and a 9. Great. I did Reckless, now all the enemies have advantage against me, and I didn't trigger Brutal Critical. I did see some comments where people are saying this kind of flies in the face of the more, we'll call it traditional Barbarian, if you will. The concept that their whole thing is to just hit stuff and hit stuff good. And this is now allowing you to do more things and have more tactical options, therefore making it more complex to play a Barbarian. And to those people, I would say, ignore Brutal Strike entirely and just use Reckless Attack as its main feature, giving you advantage on attack rolls. Now, that does mean that you have an ability that you would never use, but maybe if you don't want to put too much thought into it, just use Reckless Attack as base and only use Brutal Strike when you need it. But you're guaranteed an extra D10 damage every time you strike if you forego the advantage. And you can still apply one of these effects. Now, talking it through, the way that it is explained is you activate Reckless Attack, and therefore attacks you make on your turn with strength have advantage. The way Brutal Strike is written here is you can forego advantage on the next attack to do an extra D10 damage and one of these effects. The way that it's written, and I think the way it's meant to be interpreted, is that you could forego advantage on both of those attacks to then instead do 2 Brutal Strikes in a turn. There's nothing obviously stopping you from doing one Reckless Attack, attacking with advantage, and a Brutal Strike. But from the way I read it, you can apply Brutal Strike on both of your attacks. Now, as a reminder to offset that, utilizing Reckless Attack still provides the enemy advantage on attack rolls against you until the start of your next turn, regardless of if you use Reckless Attack in its base feature or you use Brutal Strike. So that's something that you have to think about when you're offset, because you're like, oh, I'll use Reckless Attack and just use 2 Brutal Strikes to do an extra 2d10 damage over 2 strikes. You have that, sure, but all enemies now have advantage on attack rolls against you. All enemies, mind you. So that's sort of, I think, the balancing factor there. But it's a guaranteed D10 damage were you to hit, and then again, potentially 2d10 a turn when you have, obviously you have 2 attacks at this point. Also, to note, Forceful Blow does not have a size limitation or a saving throw. You could just knock somebody back 15 feet, no questions asked. And you can then move up to 15 feet, half your movement speed, which, depending on what you're, and again, you can move half your movement speed straight towards the target without provoking attacks of opportunity. You can do that, and then you still have access to your base movement. This is not eating up your movement speed for the turn. This is part of Forceful Blow. So you can use your movement speed after that. So if you need to knock somebody back, use this half movement speed without provoking attacks of opportunity to weave through enemies and then continue your move. That's an option you have if you need to, or use it as a means to reposition yourself in the combat. It also is really tactically useful to get enemies away from your allies. I guess in theory, you could attack an ally to push them 15 feet away if you really wanted to, but also, there's nothing saying you can't push somebody off a cliff or into a trap or into lava or what have you with this. There's really no limitations. Or, Hamstring Blow, you cut their movement speed by 15 feet until the start of your next turn. Also, the way Hamstring Blow is written, if you are in fact able to Brutal Strike twice in a turn, you could cut their movement speed into by 30 feet. Because it doesn't list anywhere here, you can only use this effect once per turn or only reduce their movement speed using this effect once per turn. So you could use Hamstring Blow twice, doing an extra 2d10 damage, and knock their movement speed down by 30 feet. Or alternatively, push them 30 feet away with 2 strikes, and then again, each one of those would allow you to move half your movement speed. So you can knock somebody pretty far. And this isn't counting weapons that have the push weapon mastery feature, or, potentially reach weapons that have longer range. So there's a lot of really cool things you can do with this Brutal Strike. At 13, you get Brutal Strike Improvement, which is 2 new abilities to use with it. Staggering Blow is the target has disadvantage on the next saving throw it makes, and it can make opportunity attacks until the start of your next turn. This is a nice benefit in the fact that, 1, you now can possibly queue something up for an ally because they have disadvantage on the next saving throw. So you have a spellcaster buddy coming up right after you. They can hit them with, potentially something pretty strong. They have disadvantage on it. And now they can't make opportunity attacks until the start of your next turn, potentially allowing you or allies to skirt around them if need be. And then Sundering Blow, it leaves a creature an opening in the creature's defense for an ally. The next attack roll made by another creature against that target gains a bonus to that roll equal to your rage damage. It seems, I originally thought this was tied to you get a damage boost. It seems like this is to give them a bonus to the attack roll equal to your rage damage. This is probably the weakest option because at most your rage damage is going to be +4. So you are still dealing the extra D10 damage to them, but you're effectively giving an ally anywhere between a +3 or a +4 to an attack roll. That just seems like a really weak option. When you have things like disadvantage on a next saving throw and no opportunity attacks, or again, the very powerful movement speed cutting or knocking back. Much better options. I think Sundering Blow is the weakest one here and could probably be altered or let go. We did get a change to Persistent Rage. It's now when you roll initiative, you regain all uses of your expended rage. That's a once per long rest ability. So not only do you have your base number of rages, you get 1 rage back on a short rest. At 15th level, you can now choose to, when you roll initiative, to just get all of your rage uses back. To reset that, you still get the 1 back on a short rest. Persistent Rage now just gives you once per long rest a way to pop all of your rages back to basically ensure you're always going to have access to it. And they did change a little bit here, saying that the rage ends early only if you're unconscious, not incapacitated. So if you get incapacitated by one way or another, you can still maintain your rage. It only goes down if you get knocked unconscious or the 10-minute time runs out. And then they did change Primal Champion to now say your strength and constitution score increases by 4 to a maximum of 26. And that's because they have changed the way the ability score improvement feat works, which we'll cover, I guess, in another video. But that now allows you to extend something past 20 with your 19th level ability score improvement. Then we get Brutal Strike improvement here at 17, which is the last Brutal Strike update. It now deals, your extra Brutal Strike damage is 2d10 up from 1d10. So again, with 2 attacks on a turn, 2 Brutal Strikes would allow you to do 2d10 plus an additional 2d10 if you hit with both. So up a potentially extra 4d10. And because these are dice rolls, if you happen to crit on that Brutal Strike, that number would double up to 4d10. Also, you can now use 2 different Brutal Strike effects when you strike a target. So you could potentially lower their movement speed and knock them back, give them disadvantage and knock them back, however you want to work it out. Also, worth noting is that Reckless Attack is when you make an attack roll using strength. So all of the stuff about pushing people back, lowering their movement speed, that can all be done with thrown weapons, like a javelin, something that uses strength for its thrown damage. So you could throw a javelin 30 feet and then use that to knock somebody 15 feet back or something like that. Also, consider if you have multiple, there's no limitation that Reckless Attack is when you take, it's whenever you make attack rolls using strength. So if you have some means of using a bonus action attack as a barbarian, whether that be through something like a Berserker subclass, Polearm Mastery, bonus action attack, whatever the case may be, if you have access to a bonus action attack, that could potentially be, when activating Reckless Attack, a 3rd Brutal Strike on a turn, allowing you to do an extra 3d10 damage over 3 attacks, or potentially 6d10 damage over when you hit level 17, and then again applying multiple iterations of the various Brutal Strike abilities. So something to consider, it may be worth foregoing that Great Axe to go for a Polearm to have that consistent bonus action damage. And then the only subclass we also received in here was the Path of the World Tree Barbarian. Still a subclass that I could pretty much leave. I don't really love it, but they did make some improvements to make it better overall. So now we have Vitality of the Tree, your level 3 ability, now gives you temporary hit points, right? When you activate a rage, which is just triggered on its activation, you get temporary hit points equal to your Barbarian level, which honestly, temporary hit points plus rage is a very powerful and useful mechanic. So consider you can do quite a bit with that. Just to keep yourself alive with taking half damage and the temporary hit points, and it's whenever you activate your rage, so you don't even have to do anything, it just triggers. And then you also have this ability, Life-Giving Force, at the start of each of your turns while your rage is active. At the start of each of your turns, you can choose another creature within 10 feet to give them temporary hit points. You roll a number of d6s equal to your rage damage, so anywhere between 2d6 or 4d6, and add them together. And it's at the start of each of your turns, choose a creature. So you can choose a different creature each turn, as far as I can tell, and give each of them temporary hit points at the start of each of your turns. So, hey, you get them on this turn, and then you get them on the next turn. And then it is just when your rage ends, all of those temporary hit points vanish. But nothing here states that when you give it to somebody else, the other person loses them. So it's a nice bit of buff and support options for a Barbarian. Branches of the tree here at 6th level. While your rage is active, whenever a creature you can see starts its turn within 30 feet of you, you can use your reaction. Reactionary consistent uses as a Barbarian is nice. To summon spectral branches of the World Tree, the target must succeed on a strength saving throw or be teleported into an unoccupied space within 5 feet of you. There must be a space that can support them, and then after they teleport, you can reduce their speed to 0 until the end of the current turn. Reminder that in the 2024 Player's Handbook, there will be language that states anyone can voluntarily, listed here, any creature can voluntarily fail any saving throw. So if you want to use this as an opportunity to bring somebody, an ally, to you, they can choose to voluntarily fail as long as they're within 30 feet. And then you can choose to reduce their speed to 0. Obviously, you probably wouldn't do that if it's an ally. But it's whenever a creature starts its turn within 30 feet of you. So this triggers on them starting their turn and you using your reaction. You could also use this as a way to potentially save an ally by teleporting an enemy to you and then cutting their movement speed to 0 so that that enemy can't move. They have to engage with you. And that's pretty much I think that's a pretty useful feature. Again, it doesn't really feel very Barbarian. It feels much more Druid to me, but either way. Battering Roots at 10th level. During your turn, while you wield a melee weapon with the heavy or versatile property, your reach with that weapon increases by 10 feet. Mind you, it doesn't increase to 10 feet, it increases by 10 feet. So if you have any other means of increasing your reach, this is now increased by 10 more. So if it's a polearm weapon, it's now, let's say, 20 feet, as long as it's heavy or versatile. And when you hit the creature with that weapon, you can activate the push or topple property in addition to any other mastery property you are using with that weapon. So if you happen to have a heavy or versatile weapon that does not have push or topple, you can activate push or topple in addition to whatever mastery property that weapon has, which is pretty interesting considering the fact that you could use, again, a weapon with increased reach, applying push, and then potentially also applying brutal strike, forceful blow, and just knock somebody across the map. And then lastly, we have Travel Along the Tree, which has been updated to provide more teleportation. So while your rage is active, and as a bonus, when you activate your rage, the initial activation as a bonus action, and then as a bonus action as long as your rage is active, you can teleport up to 60 feet. So you basically have a double distance Misty Step for free as a bonus action. I guess it's not for free, it's as a bonus action. But you also, the first time you activate it, when you activate your rage, as part of that same bonus action for activating the rage, can teleport 60 feet. Also, when you teleport, if you like, you can choose to bring an additional 6 willing creatures with you, provided they are within 10 feet of you, and you can teleport all, potentially 7, right, 6 other creatures and yourself being 7, 500 feet away. They're also then, as long as they started again within 10 feet of you, you can only use this teleport, this version of it, once per rage. But this is essentially a mass AoE dimension door. It also does not limit it to a space you can see, so you can just say 500 feet that way and just teleport everybody potentially out of a combat or definitely out of the danger zone. So a lot of interesting uses for that. Again, cool abilities, but every single one of these screams Druid to me, not Barbarian. But there you go, folks. That is all of the updates to the Barbarian class. I assume, or at least that we're getting in this Unearthed Arcana. I don't know if we're going to be getting any more. I think they had originally planned to do 2 more, I thought, on the player's handbook. But as I've continued to mention in a lot of these videos, I feel like we're starting to run out of time. I feel like we're getting pretty close to when they're going to have to send things off to the printer. But either way, let me know your thoughts and opinions in the comments down below. I didn't really think Barbarian needed any updates, and the updates that they gave it, I think, are general improvements. If you're a Barbarian player or have played one in the past, what do you think, or are looking to play one in the future, what do you think about these changes? I think these are good changes overall. I think they're useful, beneficial adjustments that will help the Barbarian in the long run, but I'm curious what you think. Some people may not like to, you get to see the big booms if you land the crit, or have some means of, like, hitting somebody with hold person and then going for, brutal critical to just deal a ton of damage. That's nice. But I do think the more reliable use of Brutal Strike and the utility it provides in combat, tactically, I think is a better win overall. Anyway, let me know your thoughts and opinions in the comments down below, and I'll see you all next time.